Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 12 CEUs of Christmas. I'm Diann Cohen, and I'm joined by Chris Champlin, my co-speaker today. Chris, how are you doing?
Hey, good morning, Diann. I'm fine, thank you.
So when you guys celebrate the holidays, do you do a big Thanksgiving, a Christmas Eve dinner or Christmas Day dinner?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
We do, so I've got little kids. Well, they're teenagers now, but traditionally we do the whole unmasking of the presents under the tree, and then we clean up. And then we wait for company to come over in the afternoon because everyone's doing their family thing in the morning. And then we have a Christmas dinner kind of mid-afternoon, midday. We'll all get cleaned up and ready. And it's kind of a fun morning. My mom is going to be joining us for the first time in years this year. So that'll be exciting.
That is very cool. So I'm just wondering, for our audience, do you do a Christmas Eve dinner or Christmas Day dinner, and what time? Because I have to serve Christmas dinner this year, and I'm not too sure what the right time really should be. So I'm hoping you guys will give me some advice on that. All right, so before we get started here, I want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing I want to talk about is that, you will be receiving one CEU for this event for California. It should come to you within 1 hour. If you have problems with it, please check with your IT department. It might be that they can't download because of firewalls. If that is not the case, please reach out to me and I will do everything I can to help you. I can help you for 30 days after this webinar. So make sure you contact me anytime within the next 30 days so I can assist you. After that, I won't be able to. All right, if you have questions for Chris or I, please put them in the question box. And I see a lot of you guys have been able to chime in. 7 o'clock, an early dinner on Christmas Eve. That's great. Thank you, guys. I will be sure to look at those. So if you have a question, please put that in for me and Chris. We're really happy to answer those questions. And then if you want a copy of the handouts, it is attached to these presentations, so make sure that you download it from the control panel. And then lastly, you'll be able to watch Chris and I again encore if you'd like on the YouTube channel. So if there's something that we didn't cover or we did cover and you wanted to hear it again, be sure to go to the Macro Pro YouTube channel. All right, Chris, let's go.
CNW.com will have it posted there as well. Diann, really quick. Looks like we have about 100 attendees right now, so we'll try to get to all of your questions as best as we can. And like Diann said, if you do have questions that we didn't get to, feel free to email us. Our emails will be at the end of this presentation as well as on the handouts.
Yes.
All right, well, today's topic is don't get caught kissing Santa this year under the mistletoe, huh? How's that song go? Well, anyway, you guys know, I'm not going to do it. So really, we want to help you identify questions to ask at the very beginning of a claim, yes, so that you don't get caught with your pants down, so to speak. And this way you can make fact-based decisions, ask the right questions, get the right information. So without further ado, again, now it's gone over 100. Attendees. I don't know a lot of you. I do see a lot of familiar faces. So Diann, I'll let you introduce me and I'll introduce you.
All right. So Chris Champlin is an amazing gentleman. He started his career out, was it the Army?
Marines.
He started out as a Marine. And this guy's life is all about service. Let me tell you, he started out as a Marine. And then once he got out, he decided, gee, I really need to be back in. He goes into the Army. So he served us in 2 different military branches. So thank you very much for that. Then he went into law enforcement, got out of that. He ended up doing investigations, COE and AOE and all kinds of other things. And now Chris owns his own company, CNW, with his partner, Ashton. And they do a fantastic job on early investigations on a claim to help you shut that down fast. So Chris has got a wealth of information and he has a servant's heart. So if you have questions, be sure to ask him.
Thank you, Diann. Well, I'm going to talk to you about Miss Diann, not her real name, Cohen, which we'll discuss later. But Diann has been in the industry for just a few weeks, for those of you that know Diann. I don't want to say for years, Diann, but you have been doing
Over
Oh,
30.
25 years. She's also received multiple awards. She is the founder of multiple claims organizations. She is a speaker, an author. She's a lizard wrangler. She's an expert witness. She's been honored by the city of Sacramento. And now she is the president of her Rotary Club up in the Great Northwest, who, as I hear, and this is hard to believe from Diann, is doing too much. Huh? They're complaining that Diann is driving them crazy with all the stuff that she's trying to do, which is just like her. And I love her to death. She and I have been friends for years. And Diann Cohen, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
So throughout today's presentation, we're going to give you a little mistletoe kiss because, again, we don't want you to get caught kissing Santa Claus under the mistletoe. So whenever you see this slide or this logo, there's a little tool that we're going to give you. We're going to give you a jingle, maybe a little Christmas bell, but something that you can add to your toolbox of things that you can use today, tomorrow, or next week when you're on the phone or you're trying to determine compensability on a new loss.
Yeah, I love it because it's immediate. You can use these quick. You're not waiting months to be able to utilize them.
Right. So let's do the first one. So the first one is this. Under the labor code in California, we all have a duty to conduct an investigation. All right. If you ever get audited by the Department of Insurance, before you deny compensability on a new loss, they're going to say, what kind of investigation did you do to determine that this claim was denied? Now, I have it highlighted here, a reasonable investigation. Now, that could be your AOE, COE, your 3-point contact, some fact-based information that led you to think that this claim is non-industrial or denying it. So we are going to show you a tool today on what that looks like, because a reasonable investigation could be just about anything. But again, why spend all that money to do something if you're just going to deny the claim and shut it down, right? So we're going to talk about that. So the first thing you can do is verify the claimant's information in the beginning. This is one of the things that since I started this company and I did SIU before that is, how come we didn't ask these questions? How come we didn't verify the claimant's maiden name or other aliases, or that the social security number they provided was inaccurate? Verify all the intel. I know you do an index report, at least you should be doing one at the onset of any new loss, but that only shows you so much. That doesn't get you the social media. That doesn't get you prior medical injuries or non-industrial claims or non-industrial causation. That doesn't get you a lot of critical information that you should be using. Why? To ask a question, but know the answer. My defense attorney friends here, they know that before you go into depot, you're going to ask questions that you already know the answer to. So really what we're trying to get you to do is ask questions very early on and then use it. Use it, ask the questions, use the information, and then document your claim file. One of the biggest things we see is you get the information, you get the intel, but a lot of people aren't at least documenting it in their file. So please do that. So again, the goal here is to identify issues early so you can resolve them quickly.
And there's so many questions within those documents, right? A lot of times we don't think about what questions to ask with the information we got. So Chris is going to really show you how to do that. He's a master when it comes to that.
Thank you, Diann. So these are just some of the things that we've identified. We call them anomalies or triggers. I don't call them red flags, because we're not really looking for fraud. This isn't about a fraud investigation. Your claimant doesn't have to be suspected of fraud per se. This is really just fact finding and intelligence gathering. Later in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about my law enforcement and military experience, where you don't go into anything without knowing information before you get there. And so that's what this isn't really about investigation so much as just identifying information and data mining. So the first thing is, and again, these are things that we've never thought we had to ask before, but does the name and the gender match the provided claim forms? That's a big deal. Social security number match? I don't know. I do a lot of work for McDonald's and they might have 3 or 4 variations. They might have 3 or 4 name variations, hyphenated names, ethnic names, prior employment, address history, financial problems. Who asks what kind of vehicles these injured workers driving? How do we identify if they can make it to or from their medical appointments? And is it a stick shift or an automatic? Think about that. If they have an ankle injury, how are they going to be able to drive a stick shift to their doctor's appointments? You know, obviously we ask about their medical history, but their social media. You know, the other thing that I find humorous is how many of you, when you get a new loss, actually get a picture of the claimant from your employer with the 5020 or the DWC1. You know they have them. Why aren't they sending them? You know, I get those from time to time. The other day I got a good one, but and it helped us identify, you know, the social media content. But ask those questions, get that information. All right, here we go. We've got a little mistletoe kiss. This is a little tool that we're going to give you. Diann, this is on you. Well, it's on both of us actually, but this is, how do we find this information is the question. So Diann, why don't you start?
Okay, so it is interesting. This is really important information to have. And one of the things that you need to do is you need to do an entire background check that allows you to gather information that's more than just about the claim and more about who they've been seen by, right? So Chris, when you do an early investigation report, what are the type of things that an investigator should be bringing up and providing to the claims handlers?
So again, like, you know, I was saying earlier, verify that social security number. So when you do run the right index report, you know, they may have used another social security number in the past. So that might pop on an index report. But again, the address, the name, a gender, you know, and more importantly, it preserves the social media. You know, Diann and I were just talking about this. Medical doctors rely on medical evidence, okay? You might have the greatest surveillance film out there and they're going to say, well, they just had an epidural injection or a good day, bad day defense, right? But if you can get information like an x-ray or, you know, even through social media, a picture of them or a comment that they got hurt the weekend prior to that Monday morning loss. And again, we're not talking fraud here yet. We're just trying to gather intel for you. We're trying to do some data mining. And it's a lot more cost effective than it's going to be to go out and send us investigators out there and spend all that money trying to get intel. And then you can get that information over to the doctor. So by us identifying non-industrial injuries helps your copy service company, MacroPro, go get those records for you right away. And now you can ask those questions. Now you can ask those questions. Hey, tell me about what you did over the weekend. Because I see here you were up at Folsom Lake and you were out jet skiing and it looks like you hit a rock or something, according to your friend's post.
Right. And at that point, you can ask if they'd like to close down their claim because, you know, you've got such great evidence, photographs, etc. And, you know, the thing is you mentioned, you know, verifying social security numbers. We need those social security numbers when we go get records because, again, you'll hear this over and over again that the custodians need a certain number of data points that we can confirm before they'll release those records. So if you provide 3 data points and the social security number is incorrect and the gender is incorrect, well, now you're not going to get those records. You're going to get a certificate of no record. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, let's talk about 3 data points. We're going to talk about 3 data points here. And this is weird. This next slide you're going to see is weird because I think they could be sisters. They do look the same. Diann, what happened to you the other day?
Yeah, so this is me when I'm older. I'm at the doctor's office and the nurse comes out and says, Mrs. Cohen, doctor's ready to see you. So Mrs. Cohen, the elder, stands up and I stand up. And we look at each other and go like, oh, okay, I'm Mrs. Cohen. She says, I'm Mrs. Cohen. The nurse looked at the chart again and said, oh, Diann Cohen. I go, well, that would be me. And she goes, well, that's also me. It's like, oh, okay. So nurse looked at it again, says, you know, to see Dr. X. And both of us were seeing Dr. X. So finally, the nurse went in and looked at ages and then says, all right, it is the elder Mrs. Cohen that is first. And Mrs. Cohen, you will see the same doctor as soon as he's finished with Diann Cohen. So it was really kind of bizarre and kind of different. I'm grateful I had the presence of mind to take a photograph with her, because this is, if this happens to me and my name's not all that common, it could happen to anybody, and it would be easy to get records on the wrong person without the right data.
So let's talk about that for a second, because, in California, this is kind of a big topic right now. It's just about everywhere. Somebody with multiple names, gender reclassification, or self-identification. Again, we talk about questions you never thought you needed to ask before. So we're going to get you the answers to those questions before you ask. So this way you do know if there's something there that needs to be addressed. So that way we can get the claim started right. You've always heard the term garbage in, garbage out. If you just go based on the information that you were provided on the 5020 form, and there's a typo or a spelling or something, that's going to be a problem. So again, here we go. Does the claimant's name or gender match the information submitted? Especially in cases of multiple ethnicities. You get different surnames, hyphenated names, the first name, the last name. This is important information to not only verify with your injured workers, but to also when you're filling out all your claim forms, your HIPAA release forms, you're sending material in and to set up your claim file, because whatever you enter now into your claim file system, your case management system, is what's going to be sent out to the vendor world to get stuff. So let's verify that it's all correct right in the very beginning. For instance, here's an injured worker. This is an actual case of ours. He has, what'd you count there, Diann? 19
aliases.
I call them name variations because his name is Jose, but he also has added a few other names in there, which is not unusual. It happens. Personally, I know that I go by multiple names because my wife kept her maiden name, and now whenever I take her car in, I'm Mr. Greenstreet, And Diann, that's really not your first name, is it, Diann Cohen?
No, Diann is not my first name. You see on my business card, it says D. Diann. If I'm talking to a lady, I tell her it's delightful. If I'm talking to a man, I say dangerous. And my husband will tell you D stands for delirious. So, but it's out there, but Diann is my middle name and I go by that. My birth name was Donna and I didn't care for it, but my twin sister and I share the middle name and I always like that better. So that's what I go by. People have reasons why they do this. I have a brother, a half brother, and a lot like Jose here, my brother has many names. I can only remember 5 of 7, but it's John, Peter, Henry, Leopold, something or other, Hellendorn Jr. So he could have variations. Sometimes he might write them all down, or maybe he feels like only writing the short list. So, it's not that somebody's committing fraud necessarily. It's just that there are records under each of these names and you need to be aware of that so you can gather those records.
Well, and then you would add this list to that request for records. So if you send MacroPro out there to go get these records, they're going to want to know all the aliases or name variations, as I call them, so that way when they're searching for intel on your injured worker, they'll have all that.
Yeah. So, you put that on a separate sheet of paper because there's so much information there. You would just put it on a second piece of paper. We would provide that to the custodian, and the custodian would start with the top name and look at records for the first name and then go on to the second and the third and so on. So by having that information available, you're going to get a lot more records. So please don't be afraid to ask about aliases. It's going to help.
Yeah. Rosanna, I agree with you 100%. It's the glasses. When I looked at that picture when I was setting this PowerPoint up, I said, isn't that your sister or some family member? Somebody just commented, Diann, that you guys kind of look the same. They look like family in that Diann.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Yes. Well, thanks, Rosanna. I think you're right. It was amazing. Me and my older self.
This injured worker also was using a couple of different Social Security numbers. So when you do run that index report, you might have additional Social Security numbers that you want to plug in there to run those as well, because we did find evidence to show that they had used other Social Security number variations. So again, data. We're just collecting data. There's nothing nefarious here. We're just collecting information. Now, here's this one case that we had where the injured worker submitted a form saying that they identified as a female under this name. Now, we were asked to get involved, and could not find any intel on this individual at that address with that social security number, with that date of birth. So we had to do some more digging, and we had to find more information. And we eventually found out that Elizabeth was in the process of a gender reclassification. He wanted to be identified as a female, but he had not gone, correction, she had not gone through all of the legal documentation that's required. So all of her information was still under her original name of Travis. And so, Diann, now that we have this information, we need to ask these questions. So maybe you can answer this. Why is this important to ask about, especially when it comes to retrieving medical records?
Well, okay, we know we're not going to get any records from anybody on
You might
Elizabeth,
fine.
because even if she signs the release under Elizabeth, there probably is no records. There might be, like at a local doctor's office, that they want to be very considerate and make that change early on before the legal stuff. You might be able to do that, but really all the information is going to be under Travis. So when you have them sign an authorization form, you can really, I let them know you understand. Say, I need you to sign this with your birth given name, but under AKAs, please make sure that you put down, Elizabeth Marie. And that way they're being validated. They're showing what that name is, but at the same time, you're going to be able to secure those records under their original name.
So when you ask that question, have you gone by any other names? Now you know the answer to that question before you even have to ask that. Now, Diann, again, I guess you just answered that question, and that should have segued right into this slide. Is there anything else you want to elaborate on?
Well, we had mentioned earlier, but I just want to reiterate the fact that custodians need a minimum of 3 pieces of information before they release documentation over to you. So you want to make sure to have as much information as possible. In the case of me and Mrs. Cohen, there was 4 pieces of information that they had to have before we knew which person to go in. So if the more information you provide, the custodian can then verify, like an address, for example. That would help. Right? A phone number. These days, phone numbers and emails are identifiable information. So you could provide all of that information as well to use that. Again, we did talk about the AKAs, but all of that is going to help you secure evidence that you need. And that's really what the most important thing is to gather the information so you can determine the value of the claim.
All right, Diann, it looks like we have another mistletoe kiss. So, this is critical, because we get this all the time in our industry. This is really personal information. And I know it's difficult to ask, it's difficult to talk about for some. So you're going to get an objection. So Diann, how do you overcome those objections?
Okay, so when we're going to use specifically the transgender, we've now found out that there are no records under Lisa Marie. Now we have to go and ask those questions. So here we go. You're going to say, we haven't been able to find any records under Lisa Marie. Is there a chance that there are records under a different name? Are you in the middle of a transition? As long as you're like very matter of fact and not him and hawing around it, people are usually very gracious and willing to share that information. For example, asking about it's really important that we ask whether or not there's a maiden name or other names that the person could be listed under. So you might ask, are you married? Yes. Do you use your married name or your maiden name? I use my married name. What was your maiden name? Well, what do you need all this information for? One of the next questions to ask would be, if you've been married once, have you been married? Is this your first marriage? And sometimes that could be really sticky. Why? We need this information. And the thing is you're going to tell them the reason we need this information is so that we can gather all the information and provide you with everything you're entitled to. Now, I don't know about you, but if by providing a little bit of extra information, you're going to give me everything I'm entitled to, I'm going to release that information. So make that your mantra. Make sure you tell them, look, I'm asking for this information simply because I want to make sure you get everything that you deserve. I think it's, no brainer. but you got to work it in and feel comfortable with it. Because I think that's one of the problems. A lot of times we're uncomfortable, but the more you practice it, the easier it'll be.
So, again, we're trying to get information. We're trying to get them to fill out the right forms. The next slide here is talking about getting that information now. So we've got the information we need. So let's go get that information. Because I said in the beginning, what's more important here? You've asked the questions. Now use that information to go get what you need. So Diann, take it from here.
So most of you, and maybe you guys want to type this in and let me know, how many of you guys send out a medical authorization form at the onset of your claim, right? Just a medical, that's it. You send a medical authorization form. So maybe you could look at that while I talk a little bit about that, Chris, and see who says yes to that.
Yeah, I've got, somebody says, yes, we do. Somebody else has said, ask, I send one out with every claim. Chuck, yes, all the time. Stacy, yeah, everyone,
Okay, so that's great, but really we can do better. Medical authorization form is limited. So if you look at it, you can see how limiting it is. You're going to be able to get, doctor's records. You're going to be able to get surgical records, clinic records, etc. But you're not going to be able to get everything that you necessarily need. And so when you use a medical authorization form, you might want to get employment records. You might want to get labor records if they're part of a labor group. Perhaps you want to get information if they've ever been incarcerated. You need to get records from the prison. You're not going to get that with a standard medical release form. And a lot of times, and this is one of the pains that we get. A lot of times we'll call an examiner up and say, look, we need a different authorization form. They're like, I already sent you a medical authorization form. Why? Well, because you're asking for things that aren't medical. Maybe you're looking for scholastic records to prove the case that they say they're going to school every single day, or whatever the case is. I mean, let's look at the next slides, Chris.
Yes, Suzanne said, also send employment authorization.
Yeah, that's excellent. So if you ditch the medical authorization form and you use a multi-purpose authorization form, you are going to do yourself a favor. Why? Well, one, because it's going to be a wider breadth of what you can get records for. It's going to save you time because you're not have to go back later to get it because it's not a medical request. You're going to save yourself money because, again, more times you have to do something, it's going to cost you money. And then lastly, you're going to save a lot of irritation, especially from the injured worker, because the injured worker doesn't want to continue to sign things, right? So if we can get them sign a all-purpose authorization form, you don't have to keep going back to them for those records.
Diann, we have a question from Chuck who wants to know, is there a reference place to check for ADR claims? I'm not familiar with what an ADR claim is. Are you?
I am not. So if Chuck, if you want to spell it out.
What an ADR, is that like an accident death report? I don't know. I'm free forming.
Okay, so that's a good thing you mentioned that, because if we're talking about postmortem, the person cannot sign an authorization form, obviously. So then it would go to next of kin. So like the wife could sign on behalf of a deceased husband and or a power of attorney. The thing is, you would have to include the death certificate with the authorization signed by the closest family member. That way they will release the records because obviously the person's deceased and can't request those records on their own or allow them to be released.
Yeah, Chuck said it's a alternative dispute resolution, ADR claim. Union workers, iron workers, things like that.
Repeat that last part.
Alternative dispute resolution. It has to do with unions, iron workers, NECA workers. I think we're kind of getting into more of a civil venue now where, a civil record search or a civil authorization form, and I would hope that by the time you get there, you're talking more subpoenas now.
Right. And what I'll do is at the end of the webinar, I'll look for your question and then do some research and get back to you on that. because I don't know the information off the top of my head. All right, so time is of the essence. When you get your authorization form, you get your claim, you really want to get them to sign these documentation as fast as possible so that you can go out and get the information. Now you'll look here on the screen and you will be able to see that this authorization form is for other things. You can see the medical records are included in there, scholastic, insurance records, pharmacy records, police, fire, etc., EDD. So this one has got a much broader breadth on it. So make sure you utilize this one. I put one attached to this webinar, so you could just download it and utilize that. If you don't use MacroPro, just white out our information. Our big thing is that we want you to get the records, right? And so if you have to do that, that's totally fine. We're happy to share this information with you. And then the thing that Chris always reminds everybody, but I'm going to beat him to the gun this time, is you want to get this done like ASAP, because the minute if the person becomes represented, your authorization form isn't any good anymore. So let's go and get those records and get going on them.
All right. I just want to point out there, it does mention union records. So Chuck, I don't know if this type of form, if it's non-litigated, would help with that, but Diann will get back to you on that one. Case not under WCAD will be under, okay. Let's talk about secondary employment. You know, this is something that injured workers generally aren't very honest about if they have secondary employment. We recently, just last month, had a case here locally where the injured worker was unable to perform his tasks and duties for his employer, but imagine he had a second company, a second job, doing the exact same thing. And we were able to identify that on social media. We were able to get that information over so that they could get surveillance. Then we were able to get somebody involved so that they could go get the records. And, you know, it's funny, again, we're not always looking at fraud here. We're just trying to find information, right? Well, this turned into a fraud case because, as it turns out, he was working the whole time that he was on disability and he wasn't paying his taxes. So not only did they charge him with workers' comp fraud, they also charged him with tax evasion. So that case is currently in the courts, but you never know what you're going to get here, folks. You know, we were just trying to find information, and it took a totally different road. But now you can identify this information, and I'll explain to you. I'm going to show you some examples here. I'm going to give you a little kiss, a little mistletoe kiss, right, Diann?
Yeah, absolutely. I love these gifts because you can use them immediately.
You can use this immediately. Here is a perfect example of an injured worker who denied secondary employment, yet through a background social media search at the beginning of the claim, now the adjuster was able to ask two questions. And Diann and I were talking about this before. So let's go, I'm going to go over these pictures real quick. Here we were doing some work in the movie industry. One of those actors there claimed that they couldn't work anymore, yet they were out promoting the upcoming event. So not only do we have them active and doing things they claim they can't do, we have them promoting an event. We have a time, a date, a location to do surveillance if we needed to. The other slide, gentleman had a barbecue business on the side with a website. So what was really good about that is he had a blog, he had a shop, you know, so you can show that he's earning an income because he's selling product. He had an events tab. If you can see that over there on the screen, he had an events section. So not only can we look at future events coming up, but we can also identify prior events. Now, here is the mistletoe kiss that Diann and I want to share with you. Diann, I've got this information. I'm the claims examiner. I'm getting ready to do my initial 3-point contact. What can I do now with this information?
Well, when you're talking to them, you can, after you do all your routine questions that you have to do, you can then state, well, I see that you own a business and it's a barbecue business. And I see that you have all these upcoming events. Well, you know this, of course, because you did an early investigation background on the person. And then you can talk to them about that. You know, if you had sent surveillance out before and you got film on them, you could ask them if they'd like to close their claim down. You could still ask them if they'd like to close that claim down based off of the information. They didn't cancel any of their events, and you can ask them, how are you planning on doing those events, given the fact that you can't lift, 5 pounds? So there's a lot of different things that you could do.
So this is tactical, folks. This is strictly a tactical maneuver where you can sit on this information and wait and use it at a later date and time. But again, I think in today's world, as I'm learning, we're trying to find information, as I said, to shut down a claim. You're trying to prove deny a claim. Now you can ask these questions. And I would just ask, hey, how is it that you can do this, but you can't do that? They're going to either hang up the phone on you, they're going to lawyer up, or they're going to, you send them over a claims withdrawal form and they're going to go away. But it's information that you can use now. Now you're coming into a 911 phone call as a police officer and dispatch is feeding me all this intel. Now I know how to respond to this claim. How can they be out doing this, selling product? We have past events. Maybe one of the events is the same date of the injury. Now you can say, did you actually get hurt when you were setting up your barbecue pit, or did you actually get hurt at work? Sometimes they don't know how they got hurt. Data, information, it's critical these days. It's more critical than ever before if we want to fight these claims that are coming over.
Yeah, it reminds me of that case that you had, though, Chris, that was really phenomenal. It was an MMA fighter, and you found out that this guy was fighting. Is that in here?
Yeah, that's in here. So, all right. So again, Diann brought up a good point. We're going to talk about this: prior injuries and mitigating factors. The biggest thing that we're looking for, and this is where MacroPro comes in, and this is why our two companies really work well together in this instance, is do they have any prior claims or similar injuries to body parts? Early identification of these claims is going to allow you to ask direct questions. It's going to allow you to quickly go obtain those records, especially when you've verified all of the other information. But again, prior injuries. Now, here's an example of social media. We were able to find out, again, people are going out on social media and checking into these locations. Well, this injured worker claimed in his initial 3-point contact, this one was after the fact, denied any prior injuries. Yet on social media, they checked into all these various locations. We identified 7 times at one location. They checked in there 7 times. Another one, they checked in at least 3 different times, and they were kind enough to put in why they were being treated there. Now, this was a slip and fall claim, so obviously a wrist, a knee, this is all, self-incriminating information. But more importantly now, when you do send out your record retrieval company, you know where to go. So a few calls were made. We verified A, that it was the right person, B, that they were in fact there, and C, that all of these dates of treatment predated the date of loss. The date of loss was in June of 2021, and here they were visiting in, March, February, even going back the prior year. So now, Diann, we know this information. What can you do with this as a record retrieval company?
Well, the thing you'd want to do is obviously go gather that information so that you have it. You can see and verify what body parts they're being seen for. If we can mitigate and do some apportionment on this, it's going to save the employer so much money. And it just means there's no way they can deny that they were there, right? Because this information has already been captured and saved by Chris or your investigation company, so that you can have that as evidence. They can't dispute it when they've written it down.
So Diann, there's a little, let's see how many investigators we have here. Take a look at this slide, people, and tell me one thing that you see that is weird here. There's something here on this slide presentation that doesn't make sense. Put it in the question and answer column if you've identified it. There's something here. Come on.
Maybe show them which line. Tell them what box or number.
Look in the bottom section. Look at where they posted this. Then look to the right where the location of the injury was. So we have a location where the claim was out of. The claim was not in a certain state. There we go. Emily, yes. The injury happened in Nevada. Well, Idaho, Stacy, no, he visited Idaho. You're close there. Look at where the treatment facilities are located. This is a little geography question. Cali, that's right, Emily, Cali. The injured worker filed a work comp claim in the state of Nevada, in Reno, but was getting all of this medical treatment down in Lancaster, California. That's a red flag. Why are they traveling outside of the state to receive medical treatment? Do they have a second home down there? Yeah, they did. But isn't that weird? This was all California treatment, but on a Nevada claim.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, I gotta wonder why. Question, again, it's a question, right? Why were you treated, right? It's a question. You got this information, and when you're looking at it, that should be the question you ask. Why are you
fraud on this guy? He was a longtime tenured employee. Nobody suspected fraud, but now he's got an injury and he lied, and now you're building a case. But again, it's only because you got the information early. So social media, again, this is a big topic here. Social media can be anything. As I had mentioned before, Diann and I I'm a former past president Rotary member. Diann is a current Rotarian president in her club and really getting some great things done up in the great Northwest. But we have newsletters, right, Diann?
Yeah.
You send out a publication, we're trying to promote.
You're right. Social media can be so much more than just Facebook. It could be more than just Instagram or Twitter. It could be the Rotary newsletter. It could be certain websites. It could be the Chamber of Commerce newsletter that shows a ribbon cutting for a second business that the injured worker didn't tell you about. I think Chris had a case just like that, right, Chris?
Yeah, I did. And I see a typo, so my apologies. I used this for another client once before, and I forgot to take their name out of there. So sorry, Cisco. So one of the big questions that we get, though, because I've gotten this before from some clients, is, isn't social media an invasion of privacy? Isn't this, aren't you violating somebody's public, privacy rights by going into their social media profiles? And the answer is yes and no. If you try to catfish or ghost somebody, create a false profile, then yeah, you shouldn't be doing that to try to solicit information. I don't recommend that your investigators do that. We here do create false profiles, but only to do our research out of, because we don't want it to come back to our personal profiles, but we don't try to friend anybody. And so it is not an invasion of privacy. And I tell my kids this, and I've got 2 teenagers, and I tell them anything you put on social media these days, it's going to get out there, and when you go to apply for a college or a job, they're going to go back and look at this stuff. And, were you a knucklehead? Were you posting stupid stuff? I mean, all of us as a society, we really need to be aware that anything we put out there is going to be public. But generally, like you saw before, medical facilities are public. Anyone can check in. Yelp or Google reviews are public. Again, it all matters, but the question is yes and no for social media. And here's an example real quick of this was a public profile. This was not a private profile. And we identified that this injured worker had his own company. We verified who he was. Family members matched, the name matched. They even were kind enough to give us the date of birth, which matched. We talked about 3-point, matching identification. We had enough here to verify this was in fact our injured worker. Then we even had more information because he had his own company. We found out when it was open. Again, provided date of birth, male, gender, all this various intel we were able to gather right away, which took us to this page. And I hope I'm not going too fast, but this actually showed us that the injured worker was actually going to be doing something after the date of loss. Now, I don't recall the exact restrictions, but I do know that this injured worker had them. But now we were able to get surveillance out there on this specific date. We got them to the house and got film of them loading the contents, and then we got them after the fact. But let's say we didn't want to do surveillance. Let's say we had this information at the very beginning, and let's say that we were doing our initial phone calls. Again, going back to what Diann and I were talking about, you can ask them, hey, I see you've got this business on the side. I see you're planning on being out at this event. How are you able to do that if you can only lift 5 pounds? I mean, it's a tactic, but at least now you as the examiner, you as the decision maker here, can make fact-based decisions based on the intel that's being provided at the very beginning of a new claim. Now, we're going to give you another little mistletoe kiss here. And Diann, this is going to be you because we've identified all this information on social media. So we get this question so many times about getting records, getting this intel from the social media places. Now we screen grab, we'll capture it, it'll have a date and a time, you know, then we'll do a screen grab, but let's say that's not good enough. And let's say you want the actual record. So can you get a subpoena?
Hey, yes, you can. You can absolutely subpoena Facebook. But here's the gift. The gift is don't, because what they're going to do is they're going to alert the injured worker, give them 21 days to be able to clean out everything on their Facebook page, and then tell you that they don't own the information, so they can't provide you with it. So they're going to give you like the most nominal information possible. So you should hire an investigator and make sure that you can save all of the information that is on their social media, because subpoenaing the information is basically just a way to alert them that you are onto them and that you're utilizing these things to either verify or deny their claim. So this is what the actual response looks like. They don't even use a nice clean form. They don't print it out every single time. They just photocopy these, stick them in an envelope and send them out. It's just really an ugly thing. So don't save yourself a lot of money. Don't do that.
So Diann, you know, we've talked a lot about release forms. We've talked about subpoenas. Can you please tell everybody what the difference is?
Yeah, so an authorization form is one you use prior to it being litigated, and then the subpoena is when it's been litigated. But the reason you really want to use that authorization form as quickly as possible is if, for example, the claim never gets litigated, you got this authorization form inside of the file. If it closes for some reason, and then it reopens at another date on the same body part, you would have a form that you could utilize by properly putting the date in the authorization, the expiration date. So you would put on there, an authorization form is good for 1 year after it is signed, unless you've extended the date. So you could easily extend it 2-3 years. In the life of an authorization form and a claim, that's not that long. I mean, it's like dog years, right? It goes really, really quickly. So do that, extend that so that you have a longer use for it. And there's no waiting periods with an authorization form, which is great. You know, you serve it and then you can get the records. Whereas with the subpoena, you have a 20-day waiting period. And then the subpoena, just because you're waiting 20 days doesn't mean the custodian's going to have those records ready on the 20th day to copy. So it could even be longer than that. So that's really what the differences are. Whenever possible, use an authorization form. Let's hope it doesn't get litigated, because there are things that slow it down.
Speaking about 20 plus years ago, when I got started in this industry, and I'm not trying to age myself, but we were using California subpoenas to get records from out of state. Is that even possible anymore? One of our members asked, can I use a California subpoena for out of state records?
No, can't do it. A California authorization form is not legal and binding anywhere except for in California. Now, when I started out with MacroPro 25 years ago, actually it's 26, our clients would ask us, just send it, please just send it. If it wasn't a really sophisticated facility like a doctor's office, a hospital or something, we would try it. The rehab facilities and the small mom and pop doctor shops once in a while would release those records. So there was, a reason to do it. But now you can't do it. Everybody pretty much knows you can't, but there are other ways.
Well, okay, so in that one example that I showed where the injury was in Nevada, it was a Nevada claim, but he was treating in California. So now the client needs to get those records from Nevada back into California. What would you recommend they do?
Well, they would have to use basically a sister state subpoena, or what we call use the Interstate Deposition Discovery Act in order to get that. So they would have to let their document retrieval company know that they wanted to get those records, and we would be able to get those records. There is a way to make a California subpoena legal and binding in another state, and like I mentioned, it's through this Interstate Deposition and Discovery Act. So what happened is all the states are like, we need to subpoena records out of your state, and vice versa. How can we work together to make this happen? So they put this particular program together, and it does a really great job. It is not easy. It is difficult. Attorneys don't do this. Here's the slide here in front of you that shows you all the things that has to happen in order to make it happen. So attorneys don't even do it. They have us do that. Your document retrieval company, if you're not using MacroPro, might do it, but I doubt it. Really, we're about the only game in town when it comes to subpoenaing records from one state to the other. But they could try. Yes, sir.
This should have been a mistletoe kits, because again, write this down. The Uniform and Interstate let me back up here. Let me finish my coffee. The Uniform Interstate Deposition and Discovery Act. Write that down to make sure that your copy service, your lawyers, whoever it is you're using to get records knows about this if they don't, and then have them Google it, because this has made such a difference in the last 20 years that I've been doing this to get intel. Because remember, again, we're trying to give you the tools to go out and get the intel you need and not wait until the last minute, so that way you can start strategizing and putting this thing together.
And then one other thing, if it's not litigated, we can use a standard HIPAA compliant authorization form. So if it's not litigated, we can go another direction.
Diann, I'd just like to say that I've been watching our count here. Our numbers are going up. People keep joining this PowerPoint. Usually it goes the other way. If we were doing it live, people would be walking out of the room. Not for us, not for Diann, Cohen, and I here. All right.
Thank you guys for watching. All right, so what you should know is that there's currently 6 states that do not participate in the uniform UIDDA. There we go. It's easy for someone else to say, but not me. So the Interstate Deposition Discovery Act. So there's 6 that aren't. Now, they're listed here. I have to say this, though. I did a little bit of research this morning, and every state except for New Hampshire has actually put this up for vote and will be adopting them. So there will only be one state, New Hampshire, that will not be part of the UIDDA. This is exciting news. However, in the literature that I read, there was no date. My guess it's going to be 1/1 of 24. It's just going to come over with the new calendar, but we'll keep you posted on that. However, Connecticut and Massachusetts, they are part of this, but they require us to hire an attorney that is local to their state in order to do the paperwork. And of course, if we need to do that, we certainly will. So pretty soon, everybody's going to be on there. We're just going to hope that New Hampshire jumps on board and makes it easy for everybody.
So this is a really good segue into our next little slide here. It's about military records, because military personnel don't stay in one location. They might travel around the United States, around the globe. And, I took out our global stuff. We've done a lot of stuff overseas, but, let's talk about how to get military records. Now, Diann, I'll answer part of this, but how do we know if they've ever served in the armed forces? A lot of public agencies, law enforcement, fire, traditionally, they came from the military into the private sector or in public sector. I did personally, as you can see back. That was just last year when I took that picture. And I served in both the Army and the Marine Corps. But when you're doing an address history search, which is part of the background investigation, it'll show an APO address or a military installation. And again, those of us that serve in the military, we're very proud of our military service, and you'll see that in social media postings and things like that. But the major thing here is, again, Diann, that 3-point contact and asking that question,
Yeah, I think most a lot of people aren't even aware that when they're looking at that report and there's an APO number, that they should be asking about military service, right? At that point, that is your first trigger that tells you that this person is served. Well, you know, you may not own 100% of this claim, especially if these people, you're still looking svelte. You're looking good, Chris. But you may not even own all of it, especially if they ever saw combat duty, right? They may have had injuries because of that.
PTSD is a big one. I've done a few of those up here locally. So Diann, tell us a little bit about how we're going to get this information.
So there's a couple ways we're going to get this information. So this is my picture of Uncle Sam because that's the way I see America. I think he's just a bad, you know, bleep bleep, because he is absolutely amazing. So you can get the records from Uncle Sam. There are special authorization forms that you can use, but really the fastest and the easiest way is to get what they call a DD-214. And a DD-214 is what, Chris?
It's your discharge paperwork. It's going to have everything in there about how you were discharged. Was it a medical, honorable, less than honorable, dishonorable? Have all your awards. It also has all the places you've served at overseas. So, and it'll also have your home record of address. So your DD-214 for all military veterans, I have two of them myself, has a lot of intel on them, and they're given to the claimant or the military veteran upon discharge. And we all have them. I've got about 5 copies laying all over the place.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's got all their medical. So, you know, if you want to see if they had any medical issues prior to the accident that they're claiming for you, maybe it's an aggravation of a pre-existing. So, you know, you're not going to buy it all. So make sure you ask for that DD-214. It'll save you a year, because if you're using authorization forms from Uncle Sam to get military records, it'll take a year to get those records. It just takes a ungodly amount of time to wait for them. We're very persistent. We will get them, but it just takes them a long time to release the records.
All right, so it looks like we got another mistletoe kiss, and this is actually talking about those forms. And Diann, you're going to talk about, and write this down, because there are a lot of paperwork for the military you got to do. So Diann, tell us, give us a kiss here. Kiss us. You're going to want to kiss Diann.
So our website has got all of the military forms that you need. So if you don't use Macro Pro, you can always reach out to me or one of my colleagues. You know, there's 7 of us that we'd be happy to help you out. And or, you know, check with your copy service. So all of these records are necessary that you need to have. But the thing you need to realize that is you need 2 authorization forms at all time. So you might want to use the first one there at the top, NA 13024. That's a must. Okay, you must have that. If you don't have that form along with your medical release or one of the others, you are never going to get records. You are not. So this is a big kiss, okay? This is a nice French kiss. You need to make sure that you know that you are going to be using that military form to locate the records. In California, where I used to live in the Sacramento area, and still where Chris is, we used to have 2 Air Force bases. Well, those Air Force bases no longer exist. Where are those records, right? They're not housed in the same place. The government doesn't put them in the same place every single time. So you need to go and search for them, and then you need to include the other. And I see we're getting close to time, so I'll let that sit. But you want to make sure the gift is that you use that one form every single time and accompanying with one of the others.
All right. Public events. You know, Diann mentioned this earlier. This is one of her favorite slides, so I'm going to let her talk about this one. This was a goodie.
I just love this one because Chris was able to do magic with this. So he was able to find it on social media that there was the claimant was an MMA fighter, and the MMA fighter had a fight the night before. So his injury was Monday morning, and it was unwitnessed by anybody. So he one of his digits, he broke one of his digits, okay? So he was able to go to the public events. Every public event organizer must have police, fire, must have paramedics there, and he went and saw the paramedics, right? And then they said, "Oh, you broke your finger." right? You need to go get that fixed. You need to have that done. So once those records came in, he saw that they had the fight, that he already was treated by the ambulance people. Then the examiner only had to ask, say, look, we could see that you broke this at your event. Would you like to close your claim now, or should we, file a fraud claim? And they were very happy to close that down. I mean, I just love it when it works like it's supposed to.
Yeah. No, that one. All right, here we go. We're going to power through this. We're at the end now, folks. Don't hang up yet. I see our numbers are dropping. Hang in there. We're almost done. Another mistletoe kiss. These are 10 questions that Diann and I have worked on to ask at the onset of a claim. So you've got the background investigation. You've got this information. Now, here are ways to ask these questions. Tell me about your other job. Let's not say, have you ever worked anywhere else? Tell me about your other job you have now, and fill in the blank. Tell me about your other job doing the barbecue stuff. And they're like, oh my God, what do they know? How would you like me to address you? I know it's Elizabeth, but how would you like me to address you? What name have you used on your social media account? Because not everybody uses their own name. I got a buddy of mine, I couldn't find him because he's using his first name as middle name, he didn't put in his last name. It's his real name, but it didn't make sense. Again, do you volunteer? I don't know how many of you ask those questions, but have you ever volunteered for any groups or organizations? Ask as if you know the answers. That's what I'm saying. Ask as if you already have this intel in front of you and you know what the answer is to the question you're about to ask. All right, now here's another tip from me to you. The cost of a claims investigation. ISO and edexes are free. 3-point contacts, you could do that on your own. A background investigation, it's $175 doing an SIU, which is $6,000. Shutting down a claim, priceless. My point is this, people, as you are getting into the claim, you want to save your client a lot of money, so start at the bottom. It's like building a house. You're going to do the foundation before you add the roof and start adding all those fancy, granite countertops and stuff. So let's kind of build this up. So at least if you are going to have to spend that money, it's done in an efficient manner. All right, Diann, I think this one's on you now. We're going to send you one more mistletoe kiss. Here we go. You're going to want to kiss Diann after this. Diann.
All right, so you can get lots of discovery from a document retrieval company that's going to cost you almost nothing. You can ask your document retrieval company to go through and tell you if they've ever copied on this person before. They can tell you where, how many pages, and the date. They cannot release those records to you, but now you know that you can go out and get those. They can give you a free edex. It's going to tell you if they've ever had a work comp injury before. Also, too, when getting records, films, they could do a breakdown of all the films. I mean, you might have like a knee injury, but if you get a breakdown of all of the records that they had, you might find out that they had hip and back problems. And again, maybe you don't own this 100%. So all of this is free discovery. So you will just want to reach out to your document retrieval company and find out what you can get for them. Download this presentation so that you have all of the questions and these gifts that Chris and I were giving you today.
I mean, can you see now how much time and money and frustration you can save by doing it correctly, by getting the data is going to say, we turn these things around in 24 to 48 hours. So by the time we get it, you can get it over to Macro Pro. They can get on it right away. They can start getting the records, and it's just going to save you so much time, money, energy, frustration. Look, I know everyone's busy. It's Christmas. We're all wanting to go to the holiday Christmas party, which I'm loving to see. I'm self-employed, so, this is my holiday Christmas party today. After the party, we're going to put a tree up. So, Diann, I think that's it. I think we've had some questions here. But again, our contact information is here. Please email Diann and I if you have any questions. We're going to put this up on your website as well as mine, right, Diann?
Yeah, you can watch it on the YouTube channel. So before we close, and Chris, I want to thank you so much for being my co-host today. Really appreciate it. Always enjoy speaking with you. I just want to remind you that we do have the 12 CEUs of Christmas that are going on. Chris and I are number 2. And the third one is going to be this afternoon at 1:30. It's going to be civil money penalties, the final rule. And then tomorrow we're going to have everything you should know about applicant copy services as well as acute rehab. So one of those will be at 10, the other will be at 1:30. And we would like to bid you adieu now.
Real quick, Sandra and Roseanne said thank you, great job. Thank you for all the information, ways to approach questions. We're getting a lot of questions. One of the questions is, how do I get a referral over to you, Chris? Just send it to my email address. Generally, all I need is the 5020 and the name of the examiner, if it's not you, and the claim number, so I know how to bill your file, because that's what it's all about. All right, I think that's it, Diann. Thank you, everybody.
Happy holidays. Thank you for
All right.
joining us, and we'll see you on the next webinar. We hope soon. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.